The Krex warships tore through Earth's atmosphere like obsidian knives, their hulls glowing crimson as they decelerated. Thunderous sonic booms shattered windows across London, Beijing, and New York simultaneously. The choreographed arrival was meant to instill terror. A psychological tactic the Krex had perfected across 17 conquered worlds. Admiral Varazov stood on the command deck of the inevitable Dominion, his four arms clasped behind his armored carapace as he observed the primitive blue world through the viewscreen. Atmospheric entry had gone precisely as planned. The deployment of 5,000 ships across all major population centers would demonstrate overwhelming force. The humans would understand resistance was pointless. "Begin the broadcast," he ordered, mandibles clicking with anticipation. His communications officer activated the override frequencies that would commandeer all Earth transmission systems. Within seconds, Varazov's insectoid face filled screens worldwide. In homes, on city billboards, across military installations. His translator rendered his chittering speech into the dominant human languages. "People of Earth, I am Admiral Varazov of the Krex Dominion. Your world now belongs to us. Your resources are now ours to harvest. Your population will serve our needs. Resistance is not advised." In the Pentagon's crisis room, General Maya Rodriguez watched the broadcast with 23 of Earth's highest-ranking military officials. The room remained eerily silent as Varazov detailed the consequences of resistance. When the transmission ended, all eyes turned to Rodriguez. She took a slow sip from her coffee mug, set it down deliberately, and nodded to her communications officer. "Send them our greeting." The young lieutenant's fingers danced across his console. "Transmission ready, General. Proceed." On screens across the Krex command ships appeared a simple message in Standard Galactic. "Welcome to Earth. We've been expecting you." The crisis room erupted in controlled activity as Rodriguez stood. "Status of Cheyenne Mountain. Fully operational, General. Lunar base. Defense systems green across all sectors. Activate Protocol Honeypot. Let's give our visitors exactly what they expect to see." Around the globe, carefully orchestrated scenes of panic unfolded, precisely the response the Krex anticipated from a species encountering advanced aliens for the first time. Emergency broadcasts, military mobilizations, religious gatherings, all meticulously staged performances. Beneath the Mariana Trench, 7 kilometers below the Pacific Ocean's surface, the real Earth Defense Command Center hummed with activity. Inside the massive underwater complex, Rodriguez's holographic form materialized in the command hub. "Status report," she demanded. Fleet Admiral Kazuo Takahashi gestured toward the quantum display showing 10 years of tracked Krex fleet movements. They followed the exact approach vector our predictive models anticipated. Deep space listening posts recorded their tactical communications. Their technology is exactly as our intelligence suggested, impressive, but predictable. And they have no idea. None, General. Our development diverged from the standard technological path 3 decades ago. Their scanning systems can't detect our quantum infrastructure. They're seeing exactly what we want them to see, a pre-stellar civilization with rudimentary defenses. A junior officer approached with a tablet. "General, we're detecting targeted scans of our decoy military installations. They're mapping our apparent defense capabilities." Rodriguez nodded, satisfaction evident in her eyes. "Good. Let them believe they've found all our cards." She turned to face the assembled command staff. "The Krex have conquered 17 worlds through the same playbook. Shock, awe, then surgical strikes against leadership followed by resource extraction. They've never encountered a species that saw them coming." She allowed herself a thin smile. "They think they're the hunters. Let's not spoil their illusion. Not yet." The shadow of the inevitable Dominion stretched across Manhattan like an artificial eclipse. At 1 kilometer in length, the flagship deliberately positioned itself to blot out the sun over the United Nations headquarters, another psychological tactic in the Krex invasion manual. Commander Elena Santos adjusted her dress uniform in the elevator ascending to the makeshift negotiation chamber that had once been the General Assembly Hall. Her neural implant, invisible to Krex scanners, provided a steady stream of data to her visual cortex, fleet positions, communication relays, defensive readiness. 94% of planetary evacuation complete scrolled across her vision. Saturn fleet awakening procedures at 68%. The elevator doors opened to reveal a corridor lined with Krex guards, their biomechanical armor making them appear twice their actual size. Santos maintained a carefully practiced expression of controlled fear as they escorted her into the chamber. Admiral Varazov had modified the human furnishings to accommodate his physiology, perching on a platform constructed from the Secretary General's desk. The room's temperature had been raised to uncomfortable levels, another Krex tactic designed to place other species at biological disadvantage during negotiations. "You are their representative," Varazov chittered, not bothering to rise. "I am Commander Elena Santos, designated speaker for the United Earth Council," she replied, her voice steady despite the sweat beading on her forehead. The Admiral launched into his prepared speech, mandibles clicking rhythmically as he detailed humanity's impending status as a client race. His exoskeleton expanded slightly, a sign of dominance display in Krex body language the human xenobiologists had documented from surveillance of previous conquests. Santos listened patiently, her implant recording every word, every gesture, mapping the room's defensive systems, cataloging guard rotations. When Varazov finally finished, expectantly waiting for Earth's capitulation, she spoke. "Admiral, Earth understands its position. We request a cultural accommodation, a 48-hour preparation period for our people to accept their new status." The Admiral's compound eyes narrowed. Preparation, a human ritual. Before accepting new masters, our traditions require a period of mourning for our lost autonomy. It helps prevent resistance afterward. Varazov's carapace vibrated with irritation. "Your species has no leverage to make demands." Santos lowered her eyes submissively. "Not a demand, Admiral. A request that will make your rule more efficient. 48 hours to properly instruct our population will prevent centuries of rebellion." A Krex cultural advisor leaned toward Varazov, whispering. Santos' enhanced hearing caught fragments. "Consistent with pre-industrial species. Ritual submission. Study opportunity." "Very well," Varazov finally conceded. 2 rotations of your planet. Then we begin resource extraction." Within the rings of Saturn, the quantum transmission reached the thermopyla milliseconds after Santos secured the agreement. Inside the command chamber of humanity's first true battleship, its hull composed of programmable matter that rendered it indistinguishable from the ice fragments surrounding it. Captain Amir Chen received the coded signal. "Wake the fleet," he ordered. Throughout Saturn's rings, thousands of seemingly ordinary ice chunks began subtle transformations as stealth vessels powered up their dark matter drives. The ships had hidden here for years, assembled in secret, their existence unknown even to most humans. On Mars Colony, beneath the dust-covered habitation domes that Krex intelligence had dismissed as primitive settlement attempts, Quaim Ose, officially listed as civilian governor, entered his authorization code into a biometric lock. The reinforced door slid open to reveal a cavern extending kilometers into the Martian crust, filled with weapons that operated on principles Krex science hadn't discovered. In her diplomatic quarters, actually a detention cell aboard the inevitable Dominion, Santos sat in meditative posture, eyes closed. As her guards watched through surveillance, they saw only a human female engaged in a primitive calming ritual. They couldn't see her consciousness mapping every corridor she had passed, every system she had touched, transmitting the data through quantum channels undetectable by Krex technology. They couldn't see the microscopic machines that had transferred from her fingertips each time she had touched a surface, now quietly infiltrating the flagship's systems. That evening, Varazov reviewed footage of humans worldwide, apparently preparing for submission. Some panicking, others in prayer gatherings, governments announcing emergency measures. Everything proceeding exactly as expected. "Admiral," his systems analyst interrupted. "We're detecting strange power fluctuations throughout Earth's power grid." "Significance?" Varzov asked, still studying the human reactions. "Unknown. The patterns appear random, possibly failing infrastructure under stress." Varzov dismissed the concern with a flick of his lower arms. Expected behavior for a species facing technological superiority. The analyst hesitated. "Sir, the patterns are perfectly random." "Explain." "The fluctuations. They mimic random failures too perfectly. As if designed to appear random." The Admiral's attention shifted from the human footage. "Investigate. Target the island landmass," Varzov ordered, talons tapping impatiently on his command console. "A precision strike. Minimal casualties, maximum visibility." The weapons officer acknowledged with a respectful posture, four arms working in perfect synchrony across the targeting systems. "Orbital bombardment ready, Admiral." "Target: Madagascar." "Proceed." Across the Krex fleet, primary weapons systems surged with energy, focusing on the isolated island nation. The demonstration strike would shatter human resistance before it formed. Another chapter from the Dominion's conquest playbook. "Firing," the officer announced. Nothing happened. "Report," Varzov demanded, his exoskeleton flushing dark orange with agitation. "Weapon systems reporting. Malfunctions, Admiral. Firing mechanisms not responding." Similar reports flooded in from across the fleet. Catastrophic failures in targeting systems, power fluctuations, unexplained shutdowns. Engineers frantically diagnosed problems that shouldn't exist in their meticulously maintained systems. Varzov's compound eyes narrowed. "Deploy ground forces. Mexico City, full tactical complement." Within minutes, dropships descended toward the sprawling metropolis, carrying elite Krex shock troops. As they approached, their sensors reported exactly what was expected: mass evacuation, abandoned streets, the occasional human vehicle fleeing the landing zone. Commander Kritzak led his warriors from the first dropship, scanning the eerily quiet cityscape. The emptiness unnerved him, though he would never admit it. 17 planetary conquests, and never had a species simply disappeared. "Forward," he ordered. "Secure the central administrative district." The invasion force advanced cautiously through deserted streets. Motion sensors detected nothing larger than small animals. The silence was broken only by the rhythmic clicking of Krex armor against pavement. A small spherical object rolled into the street ahead. A child's toy ball. Kritzak signaled a halt, dispatching a scout to investigate. The warrior approached cautiously, scanning the object. "Simple plaything, Commander. No explosives." "No." The ball suddenly split open, releasing a cloud of microscopic particles that swarmed the scout's armor, finding imperceptible seams and penetrating within seconds. The warrior convulsed, armor systems failing catastrophically. Before Kritzak could issue retreat orders, the entire street came alive. Parked vehicles, trash receptacles, vending machines, even decorative planters transformed, unfolding into thousands of combat drones that swarmed his troops from all directions. Deep beneath Mexico City, in a command center unknown to Krex intelligence, Colonel Lucia Rice sat motionless in a suspension cradle, her consciousness distributed across the swarm through a neural interface. She didn't control each unit individually. She became the swarm, her human intuition guiding thousands of separate engagements simultaneously. Similar ambushes activated worldwide as Krex ground forces encountered what appeared to be empty cities, only to find themselves fighting against environments that transformed around them. Aboard the inevitable Dominion, Santos sat cross-legged in her cell, eyes closed in apparent meditation. In reality, her consciousness moved through the ship's systems, guided by the infiltration nanites she had deployed. Her implant translated the alien architecture into navigable pathways, identifying critical vulnerabilities. The door slid open, and a Krex officer entered. "The Admiral demands your presence." Santos opened her eyes, the picture of human submission. Of course. They escorted her to the command deck, where Varizoth loomed before a tactical display showing cascading failures across his invasion force. "Explain this," he demanded, mandibles clicking furiously. Santos tilted her head in practiced confusion. "I don't understand, Admiral. Your primitive species cannot possibly have developed defenses against Krex weaponry. Perhaps your systems are malfunctioning," she suggested innocently. "Space travel can be so demanding on equipment." Varzoth leaned forward, his massive frame towering over her. "What are you hiding?" Before Santos could manufacture another pleasantly evasive response, an agitated officer burst onto the command deck. "Admiral, deep space sensors are detecting objects accelerating from the outer system." "Identify," Varzoth snapped. "Unknown configuration." "But sir, they're moving faster than our engines should allow." As the tactical display updated, Santos permitted herself the smallest of smiles. The 48-hour window hadn't been for human submission preparations. It had been for Captain Chen's fleet to arrive. The waiting game was over. Dawn broke over the Pacific as the 48-hour deadline approached its final hours. Varzoth had retreated to his private chambers aboard the inevitable Dominion, surrounded by tactical displays showing catastrophic ground mission failures and inexplicable system malfunctions. His carapace had darkened to a deep maroon, a biological stress response that he couldn't control. "Enough games," he hissed to his assembled command staff. "Prepare full orbital bombardment. Every population center simultaneously." His weapons officer hesitated. "Admiral, engineering reports weapons systems are still compromised. Override safety protocols. Manual targeting." Varzoth's mandibles clicked rapidly in agitation. "I will not be humiliated by a pre-stellar species." As the fleet scrambled to comply, terminals across the Armada suddenly went dark. When they reactivated seconds later, every screen displayed the same human face. Commander Elena Santos, no longer aboard the flagship. "You seem to be experiencing technical difficulties," she said, a slight smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "Perhaps we can assist." Varzoth slammed his primary fists against his command console. "Where is she? How is this possible?" "Admiral." His sensor officer interrupted, voice trembling. "Massive energy signatures activating worldwide." Off the coast of Japan, the Pacific Ocean began to churn. A circular section 2 kilometers in diameter rose upward, water cascading from its edges as a massive launch platform emerged. Similar disturbances appeared in oceans worldwide. In the Himalayan mountains, what had appeared to be natural glacier faces collapsed, revealing massive hangar entrances carved into the rock. The snow-covered slopes of Mount Kilimanjaro split open along previously invisible seams. Most dramatically, the endless dunes of the Sahara began to swirl into massive vortices as the sand, actually billions of programmable microparticles, shifted away to reveal launch facilities extending kilometers below the surface. Earth itself seemed to transform before the stunned Krex observers. What their intelligence had classified as a technologically developing world was reconfiguring into an integrated defense platform more sophisticated than anything in the Dominion's arsenal. In orbit, the primitive communication satellites the Krex had dismissed as irrelevant suddenly linked together, energy fields connecting them into a lattice surrounding the planet. "Planetary shield activating," Santos announced from screens across the Krex fleet. "Your weapons will no longer function within Earth's atmosphere or orbital space." Varzoth stared in disbelief at the sensor readings. "Impossible. Your species was under surveillance for decades. You cannot have developed this technology without detection." "We didn't develop along your technological path," Santos explained, her image replaced by schematics of Krex scanning technology, alongside the quantum principles Earth had instead pursued. "Because we found a better one. Your surveillance was looking for development patterns you understood. Meanwhile, we built beneath your notice. The sensor officer's voice cracked with alarm. Admiral, the objects from the outer system, they're decelerating. The tactical display showed hundreds, then thousands of vessels emerging from superluminal travel, ships unlike any in the Dominion's records. At their center, the Thermopylae dropped its camouflage, its hull seeming to absorb all light like a moving hole in space. We detected your approach 13 years ago, Santos continued. Your reconnaissance drones weren't as stealthy as you believed. We've been preparing ever since. Varzov's second-in-command leaned close. Admiral, we're receiving reports of Krek's ground forces surrendering worldwide. Their armor systems are being deactivated remotely. Full retreat, Varzov ordered, his voice hollow. Regroup at backup coordinates. Sir, his navigation officer replied softly. Engine systems are not responding. On the view screen, Santos' expression remained composed, almost sympathetic. Admiral Varzov, the United Earth Defense Force requests your immediate surrender. We have no desire for unnecessary casualties. The command deck fell silent as the proud Krek's commander faced an unthinkable reality. His overwhelming force had been neutralized without a single shot fired from Earth's defenses. And Admiral, Santos added, we haven't even shown you our weapons yet. Formation Delta, Varzov commanded, his voice steadier than he felt. All functional vessels. The remnants of the once proud Krek's armada struggled to comply, maneuvering into a defensive sphere. Despite Earth's overwhelming reveal, the Admiral refused to surrender. 5,000 ships still outnumbered the human fleet. Superior numbers had won the Dominion countless victories. They may have surprised us, Varzov addressed his commanders through the fleet-wide channel. But we remain the Kreks. We have conquered 17 worlds. This will be the 18th. The human fleet approached in a formation unlike anything in Krek's tactical databases, not a rigid structure, but a constantly shifting, almost organic pattern. The Thermopylae led the advance, its light-absorbing hull making it visible only as a ship-shaped void against the starfield. Firing solutions locked, the weapons officer reported. Fire at will, Varzov ordered. Energy weapons lanced out from hundreds of Krek's vessels simultaneously, a devastating barrage that would have annihilated conventional opposition. But the human ships moved in ways that defied the Krek's understanding of physics. They accelerated instantaneously, shifting position faster than targeting systems could track. Some appeared to phase through solid matter, passing through each other in impossible configurations. Most disturbing of all, several vessels seemed to exist in multiple locations simultaneously. How are they calculating these maneuvers? Varzov demanded. No navigational computer has that processing capacity. His science officer's analysis appeared on his private terminal. Preliminary assessment. Human vessels not using computational guidance. Explain, Varzov demanded. Neural interface technology detected. Human pilots directly linked to vessel systems. Biological brains processing spatial information in ways our artificial systems cannot match. The implications stunned Varzov. The Kreks, evolved from hive-minded insectoids, relied on rigid hierarchical structures and centralized control. The concept of individual minds controlling such complex systems violated everything he understood about efficient warfare. Aboard the Thermopylae, Captain Chen sat motionless in his command cradle, eyes closed. His consciousness extended through his ship like it was his own body, feeling every system, every thrust vector. Around him, his crew operated similarly, not as separate controllers, but as a synchronized organism, each person extending their consciousness to their specific systems while remaining connected to the whole. The Kreks deploy their automated fighter drones, thousands of small attack craft controlled by a central eye. The human fleet's response was immediate. Smaller craft detached from the larger vessels, piloted not by AI, but by humans whose neural reflexes operated at speeds the Kreks had believed biologically impossible. Colonel Rice coordinated the ground assault from Mexico City, her consciousness now linked to orbital platforms, as well as surface forces. As Kreks landing parties attempted to secure strategic positions, they encountered mechanized units moving with the intuitive fluidity of human thought rather than programmed responses. In a desperate attempt to regain advantage, Varzoth ordered the deployment of the Dominion's biological weapons, engineered parasites designed to infiltrate and disable enemy technology. The parasites died on contact with human equipment, unable to interface with technology based on quantum principles unlike anything they had been programmed to infiltrate. Admiral, his science officer reported after intensive scanning of captured human equipment, what we thought were implanted control devices in the humans are actually biological enhancements. They've modified their own physiology. Varzoth's compound eyes widened in shock. They'd been guiding their own evolution. For centuries, apparently. Their neural interfaces aren't mechanical additions. They're grown from their own cellular structure. Faced with the collapse of his tactical options, Varzoth activated the command sequence for the Dominion's doomsday weapon, a dimensionally phased projectile designed to fracture planetary crusts. It had never been deployed in actual combat, but theory guaranteed no defense was possible. The weapon launched from the inevitable Dominion central spire, accelerating toward Earth, only to dissolve into constituent particles halfway to its target, neutralized by technology that, according to Krek's understanding of physics, could not possibly exist. On the command channel, Santos' voice came through clearly. "Admiral, that was your final option. We've studied your technology extensively. There are no more cards for you to play." For the first time in his distinguished career, Admiral Varzoth of the Krek's Dominion felt something entirely unfamiliar. Awe. The inevitable Dominion hung motionless in Earth orbit, surrounded by the human fleet. Across the stars, a signal propagated from Earth, not directed at the Kreks, but beyond them. It traveled faster than light, reaching the furthest corners of the Dominion within minutes. "What have you done?" Varzoth demanded as his communications officer reported the transmission. On the view screen, Commander Santos stood on the bridge of the Thermopyla. "We've shared the truth, Admiral, with everyone." The signal contained more than messages. It carried technical specifications for quantum communication devices that bypassed Krek's monitoring systems, along with defense schematics that could be built using commonly available materials. Most devastatingly, it included proof that the supposedly divine mandate of Krek's rule was a fabrication. Within hours, reports flooded in from across Dominion space: uprising on Talsoria, revolution on Menbara Prime, communications blackouts across 3 sectors. Subject species that had endured generations of Krek's rule suddenly found themselves with the means to resist. "You've destabilized an empire spanning 17 worlds," Varzoth said, his voice hollow. "Billions will die in the chaos. Only if your people choose violence over adaptation," Santos replied. "We're offering a transition, not annihilation." A priority communication from the Krek's homeworld interrupted their exchange. Supreme Hierarch Zoltar himself, his ornate carapace gleaming with ceremonial markings. "Admiral Varzoth." The Hierarch's mandibles clicked with barely contained fury. "Explain this catastrophe." "The humans were prepared, Exalted One. Their technology." "Silence." Zoltar cut him off. "The High Council demands your immediate return. Your failure threatens the Dominion itself." Before Varzoth could respond, his second-in-command, Sub-Admiral Krall, stepped forward. "Exalted Hierarch, perhaps this failure reveals a greater truth." "Speak carefully, Sub-Admiral," Zoltar warned. "The fleet's true purpose was never simply conquest," Krall continued, ignoring Varzoth's warning hiss. "Our homeworld is dying. Earth was to be our new beginning." The command deck fell silent. Varzoth's compound eyes flashed with rage. "You commit treason, Krall." "No, Admiral. I speak truth." The High Council has kept it from our people, but the Dominion's expansion was never about glory. It was about survival. Suddenly, Kraal's guards turned their weapons on Varzoth. By authority of the progressive faction, I relieve you of command. Varzoth lunged for his personal weapon, but Kraal was faster. In the ensuing chaos, Varzoth barely escaped with a handful of loyal officers, sealing themselves in the flagship's secondary command module. Disengage from the main vessel, he ordered. The module separated with a shudder, its small engines pushing it away from the inevitable Dominion. From Earth's orbital defense platform, General Rodriguez watched the Krek's command ship fracture into two sections. Internal conflict. Appears so, her tactical officer confirmed. The smaller vessel is broadcasting a distress code. Rodriguez considered her options. Direct them to Docking Bay 4. Maximum security protocols. Meanwhile, Alina Santos led a diplomatic mission aboard the Luminous Horizon, Earth's newest vessel, toward Proxima Centauri, the nearest former Krex colony. Her team included xenobiologists, diplomats, and first contact specialists. Their mission, to understand the true extent of the crisis that had driven the Krex to such desperate expansion. What they discovered in the colony's archives chilled them. Astronomical data showed an anomaly at the galactic core, a wave of altered spacetime spreading outward, consuming everything in its path. The Krex had first detected it 3 centuries earlier when it obliterated one of their observation outposts. This is why they came, Santos realized as she studied the data, not just for conquest but for refuge. Examining captured Krex technology, Earth scientists made another discovery. The quantum principles underlying their fastest drives contained mathematical inconsistencies, signs of technology adapted rather than developed. The Krex hadn't created their most advanced systems. They had scavenged them from the ruins of something far older. When Varzoth's damaged command module requested emergency landing at Earth's orbital defense platform, humanity faced a choice: destroy the commander who had attempted their conquest, or hear what he now desperately needed to tell them. General Rodriguez made her decision. Bring him in. I want to hear his story. The United Earth Council chamber fell silent as Admiral Varzoth entered. His imposing battle carapace had been removed, a security precaution that revealed his true form beneath. Without the biomechanical augmentations, the Krex commander appeared almost frail, his natural exoskeleton a pale blue-green rather than the intimidating black of his armor. 12 holographic projections surrounded the physical attendees, representatives from Earth's colonies and military leadership. General Rodriguez sat directly across from the Admiral, her expression unreadable. You stand before us as a conquered enemy, she began, yet you requested this audience. Speak. Varzoth stepped to the center of the chamber. With a gesture of his primary hands, he projected astronomical data into the room's display system. This is why we came, he said, his translator rendering his clicks and chirps into measured English. Not just for conquest, but for survival. The projection showed a wave of distorted spacetime expanding from the galactic core, consuming everything in its path. Stars winked out where it passed, their light not extinguished but somehow removed from the visible spectrum. We call it the Void Cascade, Varzoth explained. 3 centuries ago, it destroyed our deep space observatory at Nexus 9. 70 years later, it consumed an entire star system. The progression is accelerating. Dr. Imani Wallace, Earth's leading astrophysicist, leaned forward to study the data. These readings suggest a fundamental alteration of physical constants within the affected region. But that's theoretically impossible. We thought so too, Varzoth replied. Until we lost contact with 6 colony worlds in a single rotation. From her research station on Proxima Centauri, Commander Santos joined the conversation via hologram. We've confirmed his claims. The astronomical data from the colony archives matches what the Admiral is showing us. The Dominion expanded not from ambition but necessity, Varzoth continued. We needed new homeworlds beyond the Cascade's projected path. That doesn't explain conquering other species, Rodriguez countered. You could have sought allies. The Krek's evolutionary path is limiting, Varzov admitted, his posture showing discomfort with the admission. Our neural structures are highly specialized. We excel at application but struggle with innovation. Dr. Wallace's eyes widened in understanding. Your civilization hit a technological ceiling. Precisely. Despite our head start in space exploration, we reached the limits of our cognitive architecture. Our scientists cannot conceptualize solutions our brains are physically incapable of modeling. In a secure laboratory beneath Geneva, Earth scientists made another critical discovery. Dr. Yuki Tanaka rushed into the council chamber, interrupting the proceedings. The Krek's technology contains components impossibly older than their civilization, she reported, projecting her findings. The quantum drives, the dimensional phasing technology. They're built on principles that don't match Krek's mathematics. You didn't develop your advanced technology, Rodriguez realized, turning to Varzov. You found it. The Admiral's compound eyes dimmed, a gesture of acknowledgement. 15 generations ago, we discovered the ruins of what we call the predecessors. Their technology was beyond our comprehension, but we learned to replicate it, not to improve it. Santos' hologram flickered as she added another piece to the puzzle. The colony archives contain references to these predecessors. They apparently abandoned this sector of the galaxy approximately 20,000 years ago, just before the first signs of the cascade appeared. They fled, Varzov said, as we attempted to do. The implications settled heavily on the Council. Humanity had repelled the Krek's invasion, but now faced a threat that had driven an even more advanced civilization to abandon their homes. After a long silence, Dr. Wallace spoke. I believe we might have a theoretical model for countering the cascade effect. All eyes turned to her. Our quantum research took a different direction than the Krek's path. Where they focused on application, we explored fundamental principles. We've been theorizing about spatial constant manipulation for decades. She projected a complex equation set. This is purely theoretical, but our models suggest a resonance field could stabilize the affected regions. Varzov studied the equations, his antennae twitching in agitation. This approach never occurred to our scientists. It's orthogonal to our thinking patterns. For the first time in the meeting, General Rodriguez allowed herself a slight smile. Admiral, I believe we may have a proposal for you. 1 year after the failed invasion, the Reclaimer prepared for its maiden voyage from Earth's orbital shipyard. Unlike any vessel constructed before, it represented the culmination of human theoretical physics, made real through Krek's manufacturing precision. The ship stretched 2 kilometers from bow to stern, its hull composed of programmable matter that could reconfigure based on spatial conditions. At its heart lay the resonance core, technology that existed only in theoretical models until human intuition and Krek's engineering merged to create something new. On the observation deck, Captain Elena Santos watched the final preparations. Her neural implants had been enhanced, allowing her to feel the ship's systems as extensions of her own body. Behind her, the airlock cycled open. Captain, Varzov greeted, his translator now perfectly matched to his vocal patterns. The former admiral wore a simplified version of Krek's ceremonial armor, modified to accommodate human ergonomics. The insignia on his carapace marked him as first officer of the Reclaimer. First officer, Santos acknowledged. Final diagnostics. All systems exceed parameters, he reported. The hybrid drive is operating at 118% of projected efficiency. It seems your physicists' intuitive adjustments were correct. Santos smiled slightly. Dr. Wallace tends to be right about these things. Their conversation was interrupted by an urgent communication from General Rodriguez. Captain, we're detecting another fleet approaching from unexplored space, beyond former Dominion territory. Santos and Varzov exchanged glances before rushing to the bridge. The tactical display showed over 300 vessels of unknown configuration approaching at high velocity. Configuration doesn't match any known species, Lieutenant Park reported. but energy signatures suggest they're running from something. Refugees, Varzov said quietly. Like we try to be. Open communications, Santos ordered. All frequencies, all languages, including the predecessor phonetic patterns we recovered. After several tense minutes, a response came through. Visual communication showing a species with crystalline features and multiple sensory organs. Their translator struggled with the syntax, but the message was clear. Their home systems had been consumed by the void cascade. They were the last survivors of their civilization. Should we raise defensive systems? Asked the tactical officer. Santos considered the question, then looked to Varzov. The former enemies shared a moment of perfect understanding. No, Santos decided. Tell Earth to prepare reception protocols. We're going to welcome them. As the Reclaimer prepared for its mission to establish the first defensive line against the cascade, Earth opened its arms to a new wave of desperate travelers, not as subjects to be conquered, but as allies in the fight for survival. 2 days later, the Reclaimer's launch ceremony concluded with representatives from 7 species, former enemies, and new refugees united by common purpose. The ship's mission had expanded beyond its original scope. It would not only establish defenses, but also search for signs of the predecessors who had fled the coming darkness. On the bridge, as the countdown to departure began, Santos took her position in the command cradle. Her consciousness expanded through the neural interface, feeling every aspect of the massive vessel. Course plotted for the cascade boundary, Varzov reported. Resonance core at full capacity. Around them, the hybrid crew, humans and Kreks working alongside representatives from former Dominion worlds, prepared for humanity's first true interstellar mission. Remember when your fleet appeared over Earth? Santos asked Varzov quietly. You expected terror, surrender. Instead, you smiled, he acknowledged, his compound eyes reflecting the stars on the view screen. I didn't understand then. And now? The former admiral's mandibles clicked in what Santos had learned was thoughtful contemplation. I believe I'm beginning to. Your species doesn't fear the unknown. You crave it. The Reclaimer's engines ignited, pushing the massive vessel away from Earth. Ahead lay darkness unlike anything either species had faced, the void between stars, and beyond that, the approaching cascade that had driven even the predecessors to flee. As they accelerated to faster-than-light travel, Santos noticed something remarkable about her crew. Despite the existential threat they were heading toward, the humans weren't displaying the standard fear response. They were smiling, not with arrogance or false bravado, but with genuine anticipation of the challenge ahead. And for the first time since his arrival at Earth, Varzov understood the true strength of humanity. Not their technology or their tactics, but their fundamental nature. When faced with the impossible, they didn't retreat. They smiled and moved forward.